Hi everybody, and welcome to Lovefraud Live. Once I figured out that my entire relationship was a scam, the person I was most angry with was myself. I really beat myself up. Why did I fall for the lies? Why was I such a chump? Sound familiar? I'm Donna Anderson, author of Lovefraud.com, and tonight I'm going to offer you 12 reasons to forgive yourself for falling for the sociopath. This is a live streaming show, and I'll answer your questions at the end of this little presentation. So please send them to me as we go along using the chat function. And you can also use our super chat to ask your question. Okay. Since my disastrous experience with my sociopathic ex-husband, one of the most important things that I've learned about tangling with sociopaths is that we shouldn't be so hard on ourselves for believing them. We are not stupid. We are normal, empathetic people who just didn't stand a chance against these skilled predators. So here are a dozen reasons why you should forgive yourself for falling for the sociopath. 1. No one told us about sociopaths. We live among millions of these people, but we never knew it. In school, church, college, or even in magazine articles, we never learned that there are people among us who look just like the rest of us, who seem to be normal, but have a totally different approach to life. They are not looking for connection or cooperation. They live their lives by exploiting the rest of us. Here's number 2. We are conditioned to be non-judgmental and forgiving. Not only were we clueless about the predators living among us, but we were told that it's virtuous to make allowances for bad behavior. All our lives, we hear messages like, we all have baggage, and everyone deserves a second chance. No one tells us anything about knowing when to make exceptions to these platitudes. Here's number 3. We want to help people. We feel good when we offer assistance to others. We like it when we do something nice for friends, family, and even strangers. We feel a sense of satisfaction and warmth. Sociopaths do not. But they are perfectly happy to take advantage of our desire to help people. That's the objective of their pity plays, to make us feel sorry for them so that we give them what they want. Here's number 4. Sociopaths are professional exploiters. Remember, these exploitative personality disorders are highly genetic. That means that someone can be born with a genetic predisposition to disorder. Then, if they also get bad parenting or grow up in a difficult environment, the disorder can take hold. The bad behavior can start to appear in childhood, but almost always shows up by adolescence. So that means if we encounter them as adults, they've been manipulating, lying, and exploiting all their lives. They are very, very good at what they do. Here's number 5. Human beings are lousy lie detectors. Sociopaths lie. They tell big lies, little lies, stupid lies. They lie when they would be better off telling the truth. Unfortunately, we don't know that they're lying. And research has shown that people can spot a lie only about 53% of the time. That's not much better than flipping a coin. Here's number 6. The warning signs of lies do not work with sociopaths. Now, you may have heard that you can tell if someone is lying by watching their eye movements or by watching their gestures. If they fidget or point too much, they're lying. Well, if these warning signs work at all, they certainly don't work with sociopaths. Why? because the warning signs are supposed to indicate that the liar, the purported liar, is feeling stress or anxiety. Sociopaths feel totally entitled to lie, so they do not exhibit any signs of stress or anxiety when they're lying, and that's why they can pass lie detector tests. Here's number 7. We are biologically programmed to trust people. The reason that the human race even survived is because we learned to trust each other. Trust enabled us to live in groups, work together, and form civilizations. Trust is baked into our DNA. Our bodies even developed a neurotransmitter specifically linked to trust called oxytocin. We release oxytocin when we experience intimacy, anything from a hug to conversation to sex. Oxytocin makes us trust. Here's number 8. We all have vulnerabilities. A vulnerability isn't necessarily a flaw or a deficit. A vulnerability means that we want something. If you want a relationship, that's a vulnerability. If you want a new house or a new job, that's a vulnerability. Sociopaths target our vulnerabilities. They figure out what it is that we want. Then they promise to give us what we deeply desire, and they promise to make our dreams come true. That's how they reel us in. Here's number 9. Sociopaths hijack the human bonding system. All relationships are essentially bonds that we feel for other people. Sociopaths pour on the attention to make us feel close to them, which is the beginning of the bond. Then they do something to make us feel fear and anxiety, like they disappear or they lie to us. Surprisingly, this actually makes the psychological bond that we feel stronger. We want to go back to how wonderful it felt in the beginning, so we try to make amends, even if we didn't do anything wrong. The sociopath relents, we kiss and make up, and this makes the bond stronger again. So this process turns into this vicious circle, and the bond that we feel keeps getting tighter and tighter. Here's number 10. We are not taught to trust our instincts. Now, most of us intuitively know that something is wrong with the person or the involvement fairly early on, but no one tells us to listen to our gut. So even though we have a really bad feeling about a situation, a sense of unease, or even fear or distress, we do not listen to ourselves. We stay involved and get in trouble. Here's number 11. We're taught to give the benefit of the doubt. Now, in the legal system, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. That's what we learn. So we apply the same standard to our personal involvements, which unfortunately is a big mistake. We withhold judgment and keep interacting with someone until we have evidence or proof of bad behavior. Well, then it's far too late. We've been seriously damaged, and we have a hard time escaping. Finally, here's number 12. We are normal people who have a heart and a conscience, and that is exactly what sociopaths use against us. They look at our emotions and values as weaknesses to be taken advantage of. From their point of view, if we fall for their lies and games, it's our problem, not theirs. So, these are 12 reasons to forgive yourself for falling for the sociopath. The bottom line is that we were uninformed. We didn't know that sociopaths were all around us. We didn't know how to interpret what we saw. We kept giving the benefit of the doubt. But now we know that they exist. Now we know what they look like and how they behave. And now we know to listen to our instincts. So now we have the ability to protect ourselves going forward. So that's the presentation for tonight. Next, I'll answer your questions, and as I've said over the past few weeks, we now have Super Chat, which offers you the opportunity to support Lovefraud's work, and I really appreciate all the donations that we've received so far. So if you'd like to support Lovefraud, all you have to do is click the little $ that's in the chat window and slide the button to the amount that you want to offer. There's also a link in the description below the window where you can make a tax-deductible contribution to Lovefraud's education programs if you'd like to do that. So let me see what we have for comments and questions today. So Love Peace says the mouth moving equals lying. Yes, in the case of sociopaths, that's probably a very astute observation. Okay, so Jenny asks, I keep wanting to feel vindicated even though I'm in no contact. How do you get over that hump and feel free of the mess that they caused, the hurt? That's definitely what we all need to do. And there's a couple processes for that. Essentially, the objective is to release the pain and of the experience. And there's usually lots and lots and lots of pain. You've been lied to, you've been betrayed, maybe they've taken your money, maybe you've lost your house, maybe they're trying to take the kids away from you. I mean, there's so much trauma and pain that they create. So the answer is really processing the emotion of it. I mean, once we figure out what they are and what they're doing on an intellectual level, we know why we feel the way we do. We know that they've betrayed us, we know that they've lied, we know that the whole thing was a charade. But there's a difference between knowing on an intellectual level what has happened and what they've done and processing the emotional pain of it. And that's where the healing is. The healing is in allowing yourself to feel the anger, the grief, the disappointment, the betrayal, the hopelessness, whatever emotions their behavior has caused in you. The objective is to get them out of your system. And the way you do that is to allow yourself to feel it. Now, typically what happens is that we don't do it as we go along. I mean, when you're involved with this person and whatever havoc they're creating, I mean, you don't have time to deal with the emotions. I mean, you may cry, you may get angry or something like that, but you're still stuffing a lot, and we tend to internalize and keep it inside. That needs to be excavated. That needs to come out. And what I suggest you do is sit quietly, think of particular incidents that happened, and really allow yourself to feel those emotions that probably were going on when whatever it was happened, but you didn't bring to consciousness, you didn't really allow yourself to feel. Or even if you did, it probably goes deeper than whatever you allowed yourself to experience at the time. Essentially, we're all carrying lots and lots of emotion around, because of these situations. And then we also want to figure out what in our past, before the involvement with this person, also created negative emotions or fears or anxieties or betrayal. Because typically what sociopaths do is that they seem to have radar for whatever pain that we have, and that's what they latch onto. They promise to take it away. They promise to make us happy. They promise to be the person and create the situation that we always wanted. And so what you need to do is not only release the pain of what the sociopath did, but also figure out what came before it Maybe there were previous relationships. I talked to a lot of people who realized that one of their parents were disordered and they grew up with this. And so, I mean, that creates a massive amount of pain that really takes some time and work to get rid of. But the idea is to process the pain not only from what the sociopath did, but also from whatever came before. And if you can get to that early stuff, whatever was the predecessor to the pain that the sociopath caused, that's when you hit pay dirt. I mean, that's when you can really start to release it. Now, this is a process. It takes time. It takes a commitment. You do need to make up your mind that you're going to do what benefits you, which is to process all of this. But it absolutely is worth the effort. And as you release it, then you get to the point where it's done. It's in the past, and it just doesn't matter anymore. And that's what you want to do. Okay, let's see if we have another question. So Shauna says, now everyone I meet is guilty until proven innocent. Yeah, there's some benefit to that. But the idea is that we don't want to shut ourselves down, because if we shut ourselves down, then they win. We're missing out on our own lives. So if you go through the healing process that I was just talking about, what will happen is that you'll get to a place of balance, because as you're going through releasing the negative emotion, you also want to be replacing that with positive emotion. I mean, anything that you do that brings you joy, that makes you happy, you want to do that at the same time, so that you're releasing the negative and changing it and replacing that energy with positive energy, with joy, with love. I mean, that could be for anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be a new relationship, or if that's what the issue was, it could be anything that you like to do, walk in nature, play with your pets, anything that makes you happy. But the idea is that you want to get to a place of balance so that you can hear your instincts. I mean, often what happens is that we get so worked up and so focused on protecting ourselves that becomes a distraction, and you're hypervigilant. So when you're hypervigilant, you can't feel the internal warning signs because you're already hypervigilant. So, I mean, if you're calm and then you get an internal hit, oh my God, there's something wrong with this person. So you want to go through the recovery process, because once you do, then you can hear your intuition. And then you don't have to be so on guard against other people. You can just trust that, if somebody dangerous comes along, that your intuition will tell you. We probably will come across other sociopaths. I mean, even once we know that they're out there, because there's just millions of them and they're everywhere. And we might not pick it up right away, so sometimes we do have to have some level of interaction. But once we start getting those little internal nudges that, there's something wrong here, that this person might not be on the up and up, then we pay attention. So, I mean, you don't want to get to the point that you can't trust anybody, because that's not the way we want to live. So, I mean, there's a transition. I mean, it'll take time to go through the healing and everything. But eventually you can get to the point where you can go about your life, encounter people, and trust that before you get in too much trouble, you'll be able to spot someone who's a predator. Okay. Okay, so I have here, how can we come together to get this domestic violence recognized? Why is it that the courts and mental health community are clueless and actually are duped by these monsters? Well, everybody else is just as clueless as we were before we encountered this person. And, even though there's millions of them out there, it's maybe 12 to 15% of the population, well, that still means that 85% of the population are not disordered. So there's all these people who luckily have not encountered sociopaths to the point where they had to pay attention. So people are just clueless. I mean, some courts are clueless. Plenty of therapists are clueless. I mean, I found that out through our research. About half of therapists really don't understand what goes on in these situations. So it's just going to be a matter of all of us raising our awareness. And, the courts can be a problem because the courts are typically reactive. And what I mean by that is that, they react when somebody breaks the law. We don't want to be in the place where the courts react before somebody breaks the law, because then they're preventing anybody from doing anything. So I mean, that's a difficulty. It's always going to be a difficulty with the courts, is that you may know that someone is a sociopath, but until the person actually does something that's illegal and can be prosecuted, there's not much that law enforcement or the courts can do. So that's why it's so important for all of us to know that they're out there, know what the warning signs are, and be able to protect ourselves by getting away from the person as soon as you understand or get the feeling that they may be disordered. Okay, so what do you suggest to do when you did not fall for them and you couldn't avoid them, such as they're your boss, coworker, neighbor, etc.? Yeah. I've been talking about the book that I'm working on called Senior Sociopaths, and I just finished the section where I talk about these types of relationships, where they're acquaintances, friends, neighbors, coworkers. And essentially, you need to figure out a way to protect yourself. If this person is your boss, in all honesty, you should get another job, because it's never going to get better, and sooner or later it's going to be damaging. If they're your neighbor, depending on your situation, I mean, sometimes you have to move. I mean, I heard some horror stories of neighbors and the things that they've done. And the thing about it being a neighbor is that typically, I mean, they have no reason for this. They just enjoy tormenting people. So even though it's not fair that you have to compromise your life and to get away from someone. You have to look at it and weigh the risks. I mean, if it's possible to just ignore the person and keep the person out of your life, or sometimes you want to have this very superficial relationship, so that you don't tick them off and give them a reason to, try to cause problems for you. Sometimes that works. But the thing is that the only person you can control is yourself. And if somebody who's just a neighbor or a coworker or someone in the community, sometimes you may have to make a move, even though it's a terrible inconvenience and isn't right. But that might be what you have to do. So if at first you can, keep them at arm's length and ignore them, or just not give them an excuse to lash out at you, you could try that. If it doesn't work, and you may need to make a change. Okay. So, Stool Pigeon says, do psychopaths return after a discard by the victim? And if they do, how do we prepare? Well, yeah. If you discard the sociopath, I mean, I have heard plenty of times where the sociopath, worms their way back, promises you the world, says that they've gone to therapy, gone to church, they found religion, they're better, they realize their mistakes. So they worm their way back in, and as soon as you accept them and let them back into your life, they dump you. I mean, I've heard that on many occasions. So the answer is always to maintain no contact. Nothing good can come of allowing a sociopath back into your life. So you have to maintain no contact. If they reach out, if they, stop by your house or, go to your work or anything like that, you take steps. You tell them that they're not welcome, and if they're going to come back, you'll call the police or something like that. So it's important to not let them back, no matter what they say, no matter how they plead, no matter what promises they make. You do not let them back into your life. Hussein Zara says, it sounds like you're asking if he got a domestic violence order against him. Again, what you want to do is get the person out of your life. All right? If you've pretty much figured out that the person fits the description of a psychopath or has these traits, you have to end it, and you have to keep the person out of your life. However you can do that. So if you got an order of protection, okay. When the order of protection expires, definitely, you have to maintain the no contact. You do not let the person back into your life. And if the person violates the order of protection, you do what you got to do. You got to get him or her out of your life. Okay. So Maxim says, I sometimes regret staying as long as I did. I should have left the first time I caught her cheating on me. What do you recommend just to be able to start to trust again? Everything that I talked about earlier about recovery, that's what you want to do. You want to process the pain. It could be a bumpy ride. It'll probably take some time, but that's what you need to do. And that's always the answer. The answer is to get the grief, pain, bewilderment, disappointment, betrayal, to get the emotional response out of your system, and then, replace it with joy, and that's how you do it. Not easy. You'll probably spend a lot of time curled up in a ball on the floor or expressing your anger appropriately, and that means, like a punching bag is a good idea. Don't bother expressing anger to the person because that doesn't work. But eventually, you have to go through the healing process, and you can come out the other side. You absolutely can recover and put it behind you. And, in a way, you can learn a lot from these experiences. Of course, it's a hard lesson, but you can come out the other side with wisdom, being less judgmental, because we were the ones that fell for this, and I just spent all this evening talking about why we should forgive ourselves. So you can come out the other side, and it's a matter of deciding that you're going to do it. So Angel Marie says, is it necessary to forgive the sociopath? Now that's a real hot potato. A lot of it depends on what you mean by the word forgive. Because if a sociopath tells you that you have to forgive, there's lots of sociopaths who, talk about like Christian beliefs and say, well, you have to forgive. Well, forgive doesn't mean you let the person back into your life. Forgive doesn't mean that you forget everything that happened and you went back to normal. The objective of forgiveness is to help yourself. The objective of forgiveness is to let go of the trauma, the emotional pain, and to cut yourself some slack. Everything that we were talking about in this presentation tonight. I'm forgiving them means letting it go so that you can feel peace. And that's what the forgiveness is. Now, it may take time to get there. I mean, if you're just coming out of a situation and it's very raw, you're not in a position to forgive. But later on, once you've processed, once you feel like you can totally put everything behind you, that's when the forgiveness is, and it's for you. It's not for them. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for tonight. For this, all your comments and questions. This is great, and we will be back here next week, Tuesday, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, for the next episode of Lovefraud Live. Thanks a lot.